today. I'm speaking slowly so we can let the people who are still arriving get here before I get into the main part of what we're doing today. My colleague is hopefully going to be letting people in as they arrive. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on the new laws on disclosure and safeguarding. We're really pleased to have had quite a lot of people sign up to this event, so we know it's something that you want more information on, or maybe our title with Make Sure You're Ready scared some of you enough that you felt you had to come along and find out what was coming and what you needed to know. So we're running this session in partnership with Volunteer Scotland and Disclosure Scotland so that you can hear directly from the people most closely involved about what's happening, what kind of things that you might need to know, and so you get a chance to ask your questions as well. And for SCVO, this is part of the wider work that we do on influencing regulation and policy to make sure that the voice of the sector and the needs of the sector are represented in any new or changing laws. And we also make sure that we give you the information you need. So that's what this is part of, making sure that you have the information you need so that you can run safe and thriving organisations. I mentioned my colleague David is here from our policy team, so he'll be keeping an eye on the chat if you've got any questions for us, or he's giving you a wave as well, so you can put a face to the name. So he will answer any questions that SCVO might be able to help with. Just a little bit on how we'll run the session, because as I mentioned, we've got quite a lot of people here with us, which is great, but it means that we need to just think through how to make sure you're all included. So we are recording the session for the people who couldn't make it. Feel free to have your camera on, off. If you could stay on mute while we've got the presentations, that would be appreciated. Please do use the chat to say hello and tell us who you are and what organisation you're from. We'd love to find out a bit more about who's here and kind of what your particular interest in this topic might be as well. And then if you could use the Q&A for any questions that you particularly want to flag to the speakers. There'll be points throughout the presentations where you can stop and ask questions. But if you can use the Q&A, that will help us kind of manage the session and make sure we get to everyone's questions. So, so please do that. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions. I hope there's some really helpful information for you here. And I'm going to hand over to Duncan and Jerry to tell you more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Rachel. Hopefully everybody can see us there. So now just going to share a presentation just to be going over with everybody. If I can share that. Okay, now this is where I ask, has that worked? We can see that, yeah. Okay, so to say thanks everybody for coming along this afternoon. As we've said, my name's Duncan. Hello, I work for Volunteer Scotland Disclosure Services. We've also got Jerry here from Disclosure Scotland, and we're going to be going over the major points in relation to the upcoming changes with the implementation of the Disclosure Scotland Act, which is due to be mainly implemented on the 1st of April next year. So as Rachel has said, there are going to be specific sections as we're going along which are for questions, and if you've got any questions as we're going along and you don't want to wait for it, put it into the chat and Jerry will either answer it or we'll flag it up for the Q&A sections. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming. So we're just going to be looking at the main highlight of the forthcoming changes to the PVG process, and part of the aim of today is for you to be thinking about how this is going to impact us as a group, as an organisation, even as an individual PVG scheme member. It's about thinking, right, how are we as an organisation going to manage these changes? What do we need to do now to prepare for these changes? What do we need to be doing with our staff, with our volunteers? As we say, we'll also be answering any questions you've got and looking at the what now, what should we be doing right now whilst we are preparing for the PVG process to change. So the main changes will break down into three general principles. First off, we've got changes to the safeguarding side of the disclosure system. The information you're going to be seeing, the information that is available about individuals that they will be able to look at and see. We'll also be looking at simplifying the disclosure process to make it easier for organisations, for individuals to be able to access the disclosure, and also about privacy, as we sort of mentioned there, making sure that you are only getting the information that is relevant to you, to the individual. Now, the main focus will still remain on the safeguarding, though. There are changes coming in that will simplify the process, that will maybe take off some information from an individual's disclosure, so you'll not have access to that information. But the changes are here to ensure that appropriate safeguarding is still in place to make sure that anybody you're putting into position, be it paid, be it voluntary, where they're working with vulnerable people, are appropriate people to be undertaking that role. So, first off, we'll start with the safeguarding. And the first thing that we're going to see there is from April, PVG will become mandatory. If you are undertaking regulated work, or regulated roles as it will be, with children, with protected adults from the 1st of April, you will legally be required to have completed, for any staff member or volunteer, an appropriate PVG check. Everybody who is doing regulated roles will be required to have a PVG that has been appropriately completed. Now, what we're also looking at there is that it will be an offence for somebody who is in such a role to undertake that role without having completed that PVG. Now, you're probably all sat there already thinking, but Duncan, I thought PVG was already mandatory. We've been doing the PVG checks as mandatory for the past however many years. That's good, that's fine, but currently, PVG is not mandatory. Technically, it is your decision as an employer whether or not you undertake that check. Making the system mandatory will ensure that everybody who's doing the work has been appropriately PVG'd. It will ensure, as we say, the safeguarding of the individuals to make sure that everybody in regulated roles is appropriate. Now, you might also be sitting there thinking, but Duncan, I know you're about to talk about changes in regulated roles. What happens if we have somebody right now who doesn't qualify for PVG, but who, when the circumstances change at the beginning of April, does then come into PVG? Can we do that check just now? No, you can't, because currently they don't fit in to the current PVG system. They will fit in once the changes have been brought in April, but there will be a grace period coming in as well in April for you to move those individuals onto the PVG scheme who require it, but who aren't able to access it now, but who will be in a working position. So what that brings us to is basically tell everybody you know, different organisations, about this change to the PVG system, specifically the mandatory checking. There may be groups, there are organisations out there that we don't have any contact with, that Jerry there at Disclosure Scotland don't have any contact with, that SCVO don't have any contact with. But if you know groups that are out there that are working with children, that are working with protected adults, and you think, but you're maybe not entirely 100% sure, you think they might be doing what's going to be classed as regulated roles and need a PVG check, please tell them about these forthcoming changes so that they can contact ourselves, they can contact Disclosure Scotland, they can contact SVO and find out whether or not they're going to have a requirement to be appropriately PVG checked. So please tell every group, every organisation we know about the forthcoming changes. Now, as we said there as well, what's also going to change is we're going to replace the concept of regulated work with regulated roles. So from the beginning of April, you will be required to be undertaking a regulated role to qualify for a PVG check. Roles will be determined by power or influence that somebody may have over children and adults who are protected as a result of receiving a service. And you're looking at the presence of specific activities within the roles determining the disclosure type. Now, what you're looking at there is we will have an easier to understand and for employers to identify when to utilise the PVG scheme. So what we're not going to see is massive changes in what is regulated roles from the current regulated work. At this point, we do not anticipate, for example, having to go through all of the positions that are on the system to re-evaluate them as to whether or not they're going to fall into the PVG system from April. We do expect most of them will fall in. The changes with the regulated roles are anticipated to bring more people into the PVG system. This is to ensure that, for example, some areas that aren't currently accessing PVG checks will fall into the PVG system. So we say there, the main change will be around the introduction of individuals who are holding power or influence over organisations, individuals. So there, what they're sort of looking at is that if you, for example, have the power or influence, to, for example, I've lost my train of thought there, unfortunately. But if you, for example, are in a position where you have power or influence over an individual, where you can, for example, assist, facilitate, permit, or impede somebody receiving a service, then you will be seen as being falling into the PVG system. Another thing that's going to change there is we're going to see the implementation of all charity trustees moving into the regulated role side of things, but only if you are an organisation which is looking to work with children and or protected adults. It's not all charity trustees. It will only be of those groups where individuals are undertaking regulated work. And the other thing around PVG and the regulated roles there is the normal duties and the incidental test will remain in place. Not all contact with vulnerable people will automatically mean somebody requires a PVG check. You will still have to show that it is your normal duties to be working with vulnerable individuals for you to qualify for a PVG check. So there will be some changes to the disclosure system in relation to who is checked and who is not. What we will do is we will pass on to Rachel after we finish. There are links to the PVG legislation where you can see what will be classed as being a regulated role with children and what will be classed as being a regulated role with protected adults. And Rachel will be able to pass that out to everybody. And as I say, if you do have any questions on what is in those sort of schedules around what will be regulated roles, please come back to us and let us know what questions you have, because we will be able, hopefully, to answer them and put any minds at rest. Then what you are sort of looking at then is still remain two types of regulated roles, as we said there: roles with children, roles with protected adults. Now, big change that we're going to see is a levelling off of the age range of who is a child and who is a protected adult. Currently, if you do a PVG check, children is anybody under the age of 18 and protected adults are individuals from 16 and above. And as you see there, we're going to level that off at 18. Children will be everybody under the age of 18. Protected adults will now be people 18 and above. And where that's going to impact on organisations and groups is if you are providing services to protected adults, and those protected adults now are 16 and 17-year-olds, there is going to be a requirement, if it's your normal duties to work with 16 and 17-year-olds, to have both a children and an adult's PVG check undertaken. If you're providing services to adults 18 and above, it will still remain that you only need an adult's check. But if you are looking to work with individuals under 18, be they 16 or 17, and class them as an adult, they, for the purposes of PVG, will be seen as being a child, and there could be that requirement for your staff and volunteers to access both levels of disclosure. So then as well, as we say there, you may have to do both of those checks. Now, another area where safeguarding is going to come in is around personal employment and self-directed support. If you are an organisation, then you can register with Disclosure Scotland to be able to support individuals who are looking to put together their own care package. At the moment, an individual putting together their own care package can do the statement of scheme membership on a person that they're looking to put that package on. They'll get back a PVG that says yes or no, this person is suitable. So mine might come back and say Duncan is okay to work with vulnerable adults. But it doesn't contain any vetting information. So you don't know if my disclosure is blank with nothing on it, or if it's 10 pages long, but with information that doesn't bar me from doing regulated work. Going forward, groups will be able to register with Disclosure Scotland there to facilitate the PVG checks on behalf of people in the community who are putting together their own packages. And because you're a registered organisation, you'd get back the whole disclosure with the full vetting information, if there is any there, and you'll then be able to use that vetting information to assist the individual in making a recruitment decision about whether or not that person is suitable to be part of their self-directed support package. That will continue, though, the current system of, as we say, accessing the statement of scheme membership as the alternative, where if the individual doesn't want to go through a group, they will still be able to do their own disclosure check. So as we've also said there, existing legislation doesn't provide for citizens who employ personal assistants to refer their employees to Disclosure Scotland. So going forward, there will be more opportunity for inappropriate people to be referred, to be barred, as we say there, strengthen safeguarding around self-directed support and personal employment to make sure everybody is appropriate to carry out the roles. So we then come to our first sort of any questions part. Don't know, Jerry, if you've got a lot of questions there.
Yeah, I'm just answering a couple in the chat just now, mainly about the membership, which I know that you're just going to come on to, about the 5-year membership.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify, we can clarify that after you've sort of given that info out. But that won't come in until April 2026, but I know that you're going to talk about that just now. And just to clarify the process about being under the age of 16, that as a matter of course, Disclosure Scotland won't process a check, but there may be some exceptions in which we will look to that, but we'll give further guidance on that at the time. So it could be that you have a university or a college placement, but as a matter of course, we won't process a check for anyone under the age of 16.
That's coming later.
Yep.
Okay, but no other major questions? No. Okay, so next then we come on to simplifying the disclosure process.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. A simple one. So I work in a community center and we have children's groups like Messy Play. If the tutor has been PVG checked for a equivalent job in another place, does she need to be PVG checked to do the same role in my place, let's say?
Yes, because that will link you to the individual's PVG scheme record. Currently, as you say, individuals may move about between roles looking to, working in the same area, but working for different groups. And they may come in and say, look, here's my PVG. I did it a couple of weeks ago. You can see I'm okay. But you should still do a PVG check because that attaches you to the individual's PVG record. It attaches you as a group to the individual's PVG record. And that means that going forward, if that person is deemed inappropriate to be working with vulnerable people, then Jerry, for example, at Disclosure Scotland, they then know who to contact to say this person is unsuitable or potentially unsuitable. If you don't do the check for your group on the person, then there's no link on the system. And if the person is then deemed to be inappropriate, we then don't have the details to be able to contact you to say, dear organisation, as of the 4th of December, this person is now barred or under consideration for the barring. So that's why you as a group should always do the check, even if the person has already been PVG checked. Okay.
Right, and we've just got a couple more questions. And
okay.
We'll let you move to your next section.
No, that's fine.
One about committee members. So if committee members are, if it's an organisation that works with vulnerable adults, but those committee members or trustees don't directly work with the vulnerable adults, would they need a check?
I hope Jerry will agree with me here, but currently my understanding is if you are a charity trustee of an organisation, or if you are on a management committee going forward of an organisation that is working with vulnerable individuals, then yes, there will be a requirement to access the disclosure checks.
Yeah. So if you are involved in anything that may have power or influence over individuals, then yes, you would be required. I mean, for instance, if you sat on a finance committee, then probably not. I would imagine that there wouldn't be any. But if you're able to sit in a committee that has direct impact on an individual, then the chances are yes, you will.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions, but Jerry, I'll maybe leave you to type some answers to them, and Duncan to get to your next section.
I'm going as fast as I can here. Yeah.
Keep typing. Thank you.
Okay, right then. So as we say, they're simplifying of the disclosure process. So what we're looking at right now is, obviously, if you want to do a disclosure, you're sitting there thinking, right, I've got to do, is it a basic, is it a standard, is it an enhanced, is it a PVG? And then if it's a PVG, is it a scheme record, an update, an existing member, even a statement of scheme membership? And let's be honest, not every individual who comes into your group who you're looking to PVG check, disclosure check, knows what they have done previously. So you're saying, right, do you need a children's check? Do we need to join you to the children's scheme? Do we need to join you to the adult scheme? And they're like, well, I'm not entirely 100% sure. So going forward, we're going to see a simplified process where you will have a level 1 and a level 2 disclosure check. Now, as we say there as well, ourselves, Volunteer Scotland, Disclosure Services, Disclosure Scotland, we're committed to having appropriate training and guidance, ensuring that all enrolled groups and applicants will get the best out of this new process. So there will be more information coming out about level 1 and level 2 as we approach April. But what you're looking at right now is that when we move into April, a basic disclosure will become what is then a level 1 disclosure. So anybody who requires a basic disclosure will apply for a level 1. If you need a standard disclosure or an enhanced disclosure, so if you are, for example, looking to disclosure check individuals in care and health environments who don't fall into PVG, taxi drivers or people wanting taxi driving licenses, etc., currently fall into standard, then you will be looking at accessing a level 2 disclosure check. If we then move on to, for example, if you require an enhanced disclosure with children suitability, with adult suitability, or with children and adult suitability, that will be classed as a level 2 with suitability. That will be available, for example, to organisations who are looking to recruit individuals, for example, to sit on fostering panels or similar. Then you'll have the level 2 PVG, which will be where your current PVG scheme records, scheme record updates, existing member applicants, and the people doing the PVG statement of scheme membership, they will be applying for what will be a level 2 PVG. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, but Duncan, you just told me a couple of minutes ago this was going to simplify the process with level 1 and level 2, and you have now given us basically 17 different variations of level 1 and level 2. So how is that going to simplify the process? How the process will be simplified is you, as the organisation and the individual, will obviously agree we're doing regulated roles, we need to do a PVG check. You will then submit the information to the PVG system, and it will then be determined by who you are as an organisation and the role that you are looking to check, what level of disclosure you will be undertaking. Level 1 and level 2 disclosure checks at the various levels. So say here, Jerry there, Disclosure Scotland will be determining what level of check an organisation is undertaking. So rather than you having to get the individual in and say, right, are you a PVG member? Can you remember which, if it was for children, if it was for adults? You'll put the information into the system. That information will be assessed. It will be able to be seen. For example, we'll use Rachel as an example here, that Rachel is already a PVG scheme member for work with children. You're a children's organisation looking to PVG check Rachel as a creche worker. Rachel will get a level 2 PVG check, and it will be processed at the current, if you like, level of a scheme record update. The information, it would be assessed at that level. Anything that's available at Rachel will be given out. So you now will be submitting the information, and it will be effectively Disclosure Scotland who are determining what application you are processing. So for example, just now, you know, I'm sure all of you or some of you have had these disclosures back where somebody's come in and said, yeah, I'm already a PVG scheme member. Quick, let's do the PVG scheme update. You put that in, and then in a couple of days' time, you're getting a letter back from myself or Jerry, and it's saying, you know, hello there, we can't find this person on the PVG scheme for the regulated work area you've asked for. Yes, the person is in the scheme, but not for the check you've asked for, so that's causing delays. So to minimise delays around the new process, around the mandatory checking, what will happen is that information will go into Disclosure Scotland, and now Disclosure Scotland will say, yep, they've asked for a PVG. We can see that this person is already a PVG scheme member, so they'll get the check. Or if they've asked for a PVG for an area they're not in, they will then also get put onto the appropriate check. So everybody's applications will be filtered to the appropriate level 1 or level 2 with suitability, or level 2 with PVG. It's hopefully going to make things simpler and easier for you to use as an organisation. I don't know if Jerry's got anything to add on that.
No, I suppose simplifying is a moot point for that one, but yeah, it's changing the names only, really. We'll go back to the questions that are still open in the chat, just for clarification on the trustees when you've finished that section. Section.
Yep. So go on to that. Yeah, it's a short section.
So we're asking board members that are charity trustees in England, will they have to be PVG checked as well? So for charities in England, and I think that Elizabeth is asking a similar question about if the charity does both regulated and non-regulated work roles, e.g. a church, do the trustees need PVG membership going forward, or is it only if it's majority regulated?
Okay, on the first question there around, we'll say UK national charities, or indeed I had one the other week who said his trustees were in America. We've gone back to Disclosure Scotland there, and I believe it is being discussed further whether or not charity trustees of a UK-wide charity, for example, whether or not the non-Scottish trustees will require to be PVG checked. Yeah,
but should hopefully have an answer, a bit of clarity on that tomorrow, actually. So when we send out the responses, we can be a bit clearer on that.
Yeah, because we've had several groups who've come to us and said, look, we're a UK charity. I've got trustees in Northern Ireland who are trustees of this UK charity, but who oversee things in Northern Ireland. Therefore, if they're seen as a trustee of a UK charity, do we have to check them? As I say, hopefully we will have an answer to that, as you say there, tomorrow, Jerry. And the second one was around churches and similar.
Yep.
So my understanding would be that if the church is providing a the church is a registered charity, and I believe technically, what is it? Is it the main purpose is to provide benefits to vulnerable individuals? Then it would be seen as requiring the trustees to be checked. So this is the thing though, with thinking specifically with the church, in would the majority of benefits be delivered to vulnerable individuals in relation to, for example, children in the Sunday school, pastoral care in the community, to people who are too ill or infirm to now physically make the church themselves. So I'm thinking there might need to be some thought from each individual group there or each individual church as to whether or not that would actually fall in to the regulated roles and require a check? I don't know if there's...
So there's a couple more questions here.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah,
a bit of clarification about, so does that mean that, you know, charities no longer decide whether to do a level 1 to suitability and or just that they choose the level, but Disclosure Scotland decide which of the options that you had on your slides? So just clarifying what that process is.
The suitability will determine what you're able to, what has to be applied for. So if they're suitable for PVG level check, then it will be a PVG level check, the level 2 PVG that's carried out. If they're not suitable, then it's up to the organisation to decide if it's going to be a level 1 basic check, for instance. Level 1 basic checks are not mandatory, but you can choose for a basic level check.
I think basically there will be more information coming out about the level 1 and level 2 process as we approach the go live date in in April. And as I say, there will be more sessions that will be run before April comes along around specifics, specifically what do we do in terms of the application process. There's also, for example, when we were talking about regulated roles as well, ourselves, Disclosure Scotland, we're just waiting on, there is a guidance document on regulated roles that is waiting to be signed off and issued at some point, hopefully in the near future. And once we've got that available, once we know what is specifically going to be regulated roles going forward and the various definitions there, we will be running, and I'm sure Jerry will as well, we will be running specific sessions on this is regulated roles going forward. How do we meet them? How do we not meet them? And again, as we were saying there, how does that then impact what level of disclosure check we require to undertake?
Yeah. I think Jerry's on it with answering some of the other questions in the chat. So if you want to go to your next part, feel free.
All right, so next then we have the privacy part of the PVG system. So this is about ensuring that you as an organisation are only accessing information that you're entitled to. You're not getting asked for information on individuals who are no longer working for you. And it's also about ensuring that individual PVG scheme members only have information that is available for release that is appropriate to be released. So first thing we're going to see there is an end to the lifetime PVG scheme membership. So right now, for example, using Rachel as our example, Rachel could have been PVG checked by SCVO back on the first day of PVG in 2011, and SCVO are just, let that application go on. And let's say Rachel actually left in 2013, but nobody's removed the link. Rachel and SCVO are still linked on the PVG system. Neither the individual nor the organisation have removed that link. And because it's a lifetime membership, basically Rachel's membership remains attached to SCVO basically forevermore. Now, Rachel then could be, for example, tomorrow barred from doing regulated work. SCVO could then be passed information that they're not entitled to because Rachel is no longer undertaking that role for them. So moving to a 5-year membership will ensure that everybody who is on the PVG system has at some point in the previous 5 years undertaken a PVG check with at least one organisation, and that organisation will be able to say, yes, this person's still doing the work, no, this person's not doing the work for us, and the individual will also be notified of that. So this is going to help reduce the amount of individuals who don't require to be on the PVG scheme any longer. I think the last estimate was roughly about 300,000 people can be removed from the PVG scheme because they are not undertaking any form of regulated work at the moment. That will, as we see there, come in April 2026. We're going to have the first year of PVG, or the New Disclosure Act, and then from April 2026 we will look at the implementation of the 5-year membership. Now I will give out my sort of thing here. So from April 2026, lifetime PVG scheme membership will end. We will replace it with a time-limited PVG membership, which will last for 5 years. We're taking the time limit, we're making the time-limited membership change in April 2026 to help smoothly and fairly move existing PVG members to the new arrangements. We're working with stakeholders to further understand the transitional requirements that will be needed to move basically 1.5 million people onto a 5-year system. So the system, as we say, for the 5-year membership will start in April 2026, but unfortunately at this point, myself and Jerry cannot give you any specifics as to how your current volunteers and staff who you've got checked will be moved on to the 5-year membership and how that is going to run. What we can say is that with the 5-year membership, what has been put in is that once the 5-year membership comes to within 3 months of renewal, all individuals that are coming up for renewal, the groups that are attached to those individuals will be notified. So you will be notified that somebody's 3 months left of their 5 years. You'll be able to say, yeah, this person is still working for us. We need to do an update PVG to renew them for 5 years. Or you'll be able to go back and say, nope, this person is no longer working for us. The individual will then, and the organisations, be reminded 1 month before the expiry of the 5-year membership. So you'll get a couple of reminders there. You'll then be able to say to feed that back into the system. And the thing to remember here around that is with the mandatory PVG checks, if you go back and say that this individual is no longer working for us when the individual is still doing the regulated work for you, you could be committing an offence by employing an individual who has not been appropriately PVG checked because you have let that 5-year membership expire. So as we say, we're going to see how that is, going to work. Now, another thing we'll say there is a lot of people have thought over the course there that, oh yeah, if PVG's moving to 5 years, the question was asked earlier, does that mean I only need one PVG check and that's me for 5 years, I'm done? Well, what we'll say here is, as with the current PVG system, if an individual does come into you who's already a PVG member, who's joined last week or 3.5 years ago or whatever during the course of the last 5 years, you should still be linking yourself to that individual on the PVG system. So you should still be making sure that you as a group are attached. So as we said there, that we know that that person is doing the work for you. So it's not going to be, I just do one check and that's me for the next 5 years in PVG. It's still going to be, I do the one check, that starts my 5 years on the PVG membership. And if I require over the course of that 5 years to undertake PVGs elsewhere, I should then still be accessing those checks with other groups. As we mentioned there, one of the reasons around that is to ensure that you're not notified of sensitive information. So PVG helps us as groups to ensure we are meeting the appropriate GDPR and data protection legislation. Now, age restrictions as well. So what we're going to see going forward from April is that individuals under the age of 16 will not be allowed to be PVG checked or disclosure checked in general, level 1 or level 2. As Jerry mentioned, Disclosure Scotland will have the discretion to be able to do a PVG check on somebody who's, say, 15 right now and who's going to be 16 next week and who needs that PVG to start a job, to start a college course. That will be fine. People will do that. But generally, under 16s will no longer be able to be PVG checked. You will still be able to have under 16s undertaking regulated roles under the new system. You just will not be able to do a disclosure check on them. And that does include level 1 as the basic. Disclosure Scotland won't, I'm assuming Disclosure Scotland won't be doing any under 16 basic checks there, Jerry.
Yeah, sorry, what was that, Duncan? Sorry, I was typing.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's just as in under 16s won't be allowed. Obviously, PVG's removing them, but basic disclosures as well. The level 1, they'll not be able to do that either.
Yes. Well, we won't process disclosure checks as a matter of course for anyone under the age of 60.
Yeah, what we're looking at is that PVG or level 2 with PVGs it will only cover, you know, over 16s. It's not going to have people under 16. It's therefore not, for example, going to have somebody who's 13, who's doing a regulated role, and who, by way of being a teenager, does something inappropriate that gets them barred from working with children and adults, and then greatly impacts their sort of career prospects, you know, going forward, because they can be a very different person at 16, at 18, at 21 than they were at 13. So it's just to make sure appropriate people are on the PVG scheme. If you have currently individuals who are on the PVG scheme and they are under the age of 16, they will be removed from the PVG scheme when we get to April. So it's not a lot of people in general, but I know, for example, ourselves as an organisation, we may be doing, you know, maybe between 8 and 10 under 16 PVG checks a month or so. So that builds up over time. And with age restrictions as well, we're also going to see that any convictions accrued between the ages of 12 and 17 will not automatically be released on a disclosure. Anything that is deemed to be a childhood conviction, Disclosure Scotland will now have the ability to remove that from the PVG result before that is issued to the individual. So let's say we're doing, sorry to keep picking on Rachel here, we're doing Rachel's PVG check, the level 2, we've put it through, and it turns out Rachel has a conviction from when Rachel was 16, for example. Disclosure Scotland will evaluate that information, and if necessary, will remove that from the disclosure, even if, keep me right here, Jerry, even if that is an unspent conviction.
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. So even though it's a conviction that should be available, Disclosure Scotland, if they deem it as a childhood conviction to be effectively irrelevant to doing the regulated role, that can be removed. Now, if Disclosure Scotland determine that that information will stay on Rachel's disclosure, Rachel then will have the right to lodge an appeal to say, right, please take that information off my disclosure. And if, I'm going to pick on Jerry then, if Jerry's the person that says, nope, I think that should be staying on your disclosure, there will now be an independent reviewer who will have the final say on whether or not something will be issued on a disclosure or not. And with the privacy as well, there we'll see reduced disclosure periods for certain convictions. Because you are working with vulnerable individuals, there are 2 lists of convictions which have longer rehabilitation periods. You've got one list which contains things like serious assaults, etc., which will stay on an individual's disclosure for a minimum of 15 years at the moment. And you've got a second list, which, as they say, is subject to the rules, which will stay on for a maximum of 15 years at the moment. Those convictions will stay on now for a maximum minimum of 11 years. So that will bring that period of time that individuals will have those serious convictions on their disclosure. It will bring it down, but it is still necessary that those relevant and serious convictions are given to you for an extra period of time. And as we say, and that mirrors the arrangements elsewhere in the UK. So we'll have a UK-wide, basically 11 years for extended disclosure release. Now, you may see the other relevant information on your disclosure certificate, but have probably not had much other relevant information on any disclosures that you have had as organisations. Other relevant information, the ORI is placed on a disclosure at the discretion of the police. It does not have to be conviction information. It can be any information that they think is relevant to you as an organisation to have about the individual. So it can be non-conviction information, it can be more background information about something that is already on the disclosure certificate, or it can be, you know, this individual has outstanding charges pending, your outstanding court cases pending. It is at the discretion of the police. And again, going forward, what we're going to see there is, as they say there, they'll have a duty to consider representation from applicants before they decide whether or not the ORI should be included on a disclosure. What that means is you as the individual will get into your Scott account, if you're using the online process, you'll get, hello, here's your PVG result, and you will be given the opportunity to request the removal of that other relevant information, in the same way as you will with any conviction that is now beyond the 11 years and you can appeal to have taken off, or in the same way as you can with any childhood conviction that is being kept on and you might want to ask Disclosure Scotland to remove it. You as the applicant will be able to ask for, in this instance with URI Police Scotland, via the PVG process, to remove that information. And again, if they keep it on, there will still be the opportunity to appeal it. There will be the opportunity to go to the independent reviewer. Now, why we are covering this in a bit of detail there is, the thing to remember here is, if your individuals are, for example, appealing to have childhood convictions, to have the ORI removed, or to have a conviction which is now appealable to be removed, if they're appealing to take that off their disclosure, that can hold up how long it takes you to get that information back. That then potentially could impact that person's suitability to undertake the work for you, because it's a mandatory scheme. We need to have an appropriate PVG result back. This will speed things up, as I'm sure Jerry's probably got experience of this. Right now, if you're an individual who wants to request something be removed from your disclosure, that can take up to 18 months to do. And obviously that is not practical if you're using a mandatory system. We can't, for example, say to Jerry, yeah, Jerry, we're happy for you to just sit and wait until your appeals is completed, and that takes 18 months. We can't do that to Jerry. So going forward, to say, we'll have the ability for the individual to appeal it to Disclosure Scotland, to Police Scotland. We'll have the ability for the individual to go to the independent reviewer for, hopefully a far quicker result determination on their suitability of that information.
Yeah, we'll bring in functionality for that to the applicant's online account very shortly, in the next couple of weeks. From April 2025 next year, it will be an independent reviewer that decides on whether or not that information will go out. And by being able to do it digitally means that the process should take less than 2 weeks, I believe.
I'll ask Jerry the question here. Don't know if Jerry will be able to answer it, but if I, for example, am the applicant and I am appealing to remove information from my disclosure record, can I still share my result with my employer?
If you give, it's really up to you. The employer will not be sent a copy of the result until you as the applicant have released or consented to give them that. So if you decide to contest anything that's on it, you would need to wait for the outcome of that before the counter signatory would get the result. However, you will still have access to your copy of the result, and really it's up to you as to what you do with it. But if you don't do anything within the 10-day period of deciding whether to contest that, then the result will be released to the employer, because we will take it as read that you're not going to contest it within that 10-day period.
And it's currently, it's a 10-day period as well at the moment for example, paper certificates where the individual has the ability to appeal information. So that's not changing. There. Okay, any questions on?
Yeah,
lots of questions. It's poor Jenny to be exhausted.
I'm struggling
typing away. But I thought I'd just say there'd been a few questions about cost. So about what will the costs be? Are they staying similar? So yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm sure most organisations here today are aware that earlier in the year there was a public consultation by the Scottish Government around the fees potentially being introduced for volunteers within the PVG system. I do have to say that at this point we do not have the full response to, the response to the consultation, so we cannot tell you at this point whether or not, for example, volunteers will be required to pay for the disclosures, or organisations pay for the volunteers' disclosures. And unfortunately, we also then cannot tell you how much it will cost for any individual who is in a paid position. I don't know if Jerry's got any.
No, there is an interest. There's an interesting question on cross-border ones there. if you have a London office but working in Scotland, would a DBS check suffice, or would it be the deciding factor in where the work takes place? This is an age-old one, pretty much. The guidance, I mean, if usually it's about where the regulated work is taking place. But if they're DBS checked, then, you know, I think we'll need to seek guidance on that, because they will have had a check done anyway in order to do that. But usually if they're carrying out regulated work in Scotland, we say that they should have a PVG check carried out on them.
And I think we should say there, the regulated roles will cover contact that is, for example, face-to-face, but is also online and is telephone support, things like that as well. And as Jerry says there, that should be undertaken by somebody in Scotland to access a PVG. If, for example, the individual is providing online support to somebody in Scotland and they are providing that from Birmingham, they would fall under DBS rather than PVG.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Can I also just raise what has come up in a couple of different ways about the checks for offences committed under the age of 18? Would that include sexual offences? And I think there's maybe a bit of a question about the kind of rationale for not including those offences as well.
Okay, well, I guess what we should say there is it is not automatic that those childhood convictions will be removed. Disclosure Scotland, so for example, Jerry might get information across his desk tomorrow that says, right, here's a childhood conviction or two for an individual. Do you think that is relevant for the organisation to know? Disclosure Scotland will still keep the information on the level 2 PVG and the level 1 as well, if it's going to be there, if that information is deemed to be relevant for you as the organisation to see that. So I think, as you said, there are a couple of questions around sexual offences. So I would assume there it would depend on who the sexual offences were committed against and what work the individual was looking to do. So, for example, if they committed sexual offences against children and this person was wanting to work with children, I imagine that that would still be on the disclosure. But obviously, I can't say 100% because it will all be done on a case-by-case basis, and the individual will have the right to appeal via Disclosure Scotland and via the independent reviewer. But we will say it is not an automatic removal of all childhood conviction information. It will be, first of all, Disclosure Scotland deciding on it, the individual deciding if the information is still there, whether or not they're happy with it for to be released or appealed, and then, as I say, Disclosure Scotland, and then again, and/or the independent reviewer assessing and determining what is released.
Great, thank you. I'm just conscious of the time where we've got lots of questions still live, but what we can possibly do, some of them are quite technical, so we'll make sure that we send some answers afterwards where we can and share the ones that have been answered as well. Duncan, I'll maybe hand back to you to just kind of get to the end of your presentation. I'm laughing that you said an hour, that's plenty of time, we might not even fill it. Whereas I think it looks like we could be here for 2.
I was going to talk slower. Sort of a key change summary of basically all the things that will change within the PVG system and when they will change. We haven't discussed everything today because, as I say, we've only got an hour. There are sessions being run by ourselves at Volunteer Scotland Disclosure Scotland. Volunteer Scotland Disclosure Services. There are also sessions being run by Disclosure Scotland about the changes that are going to be implemented. We're going into more detail in that there. So we can see, for example, here we haven't discussed standard conditions or referrals. We will go into that in other sessions that we run. If anybody wants, to go on, check our websites for that information. Now, what do we do just now? And we've put it in red there and floating about there and with a sort of an asterisk at the end. Basically, if you currently have people who meet the PVG criteria, still do the PVG checks on them. Don't wait until April. If you have somebody who needs to be referred under the current system of PVG, if you have somebody who needs to be PVG checked under the current criteria, please do that check now. Don't wait until April, because by not doing the check, you could have somebody undertaking work with you for a couple of months that isn't appropriate to do so. So please make sure that all checks are appropriately undertaken before we get to the changes. And as we say there as well, ourselves, Disclosure Scotland will be offering training and support to organisations. Well, I've put both of us in there, Jerry. I don't know if you will be doing that, but if you come to us and say, hello, we are, for example, a national body with 20 offices across the country or whatever, can you provide support to us? We will look to offer that, specific support, specific training to your group if requested, and if we have appropriate numbers to undertake that session. We've then got a link there to information on our website about training and various news updates around the PVG system. Which brings us, as we say, to the end. Hope everybody can first of all contact Rachel there. Just putting that on you, Rachel, sorry. But we've also got there our email, our telephone number, and our website if anybody wants to go on and see as much information as possible. If you think tomorrow, oh, I should have asked that question, we've got the ability there to email that information over to us or to give us a call. Or Jerry, I think Jerry was putting Disclosure Scotland's details in the chat there. So there is the opportunity to contact Jerry as well.
Yeah, I'll take that, just answering the last question. Well, one of the last questions.
Okay, so that brings us, brings the presentation a bit to the end. Don't know if there's any more questions or queries or anything on anything we've discussed or anything we've not discussed that any individual may have queries on.
Yeah, just on the fees again, we honestly don't know anything about the fees. That the Scottish ministers are still considering the position on fees, and as soon as we know, then we will produce guidance on that. So it's the new fee structure will only be implemented to the 5-year membership in April 2026. But that's not to say that there could be a change in fees before April 2026. But we don't know yet. So apologies if we can't answer that one straight. But the fees are subject to completely separate piece of legislation.
And we'll say, obviously, we do understand it is a particular sort of, worry for the voluntary sector. Are we now going to have to find money to, for example, cover off, 20, 100, 1,000 volunteer PVG checks? But as I say, once we've got that information, obviously it will be coming out to everybody as soon as possible. But as we say, we're waiting on that having to go through the Parliament.
Nicola, see you've got your hand up, so if you would like to ask our final live question, please go for it.
Duncan, I thought that was a great session, and I know that there's lots of our members from befriended networks that possibly aren't here that would really benefit from hearing this information. Would you be open to doing that same presentation again for some of our members if we set up a date in the new year?
We can indeed. It's what. Yep. It's, as I say, it's what we're looking to do is, as we said right at the start, we need to obviously get this information out to as many groups as possible. We don't want groups unintentionally breaking the law and potentially being prosecuted because you haven't done appropriate PVGs. As I say, tell everybody if you've got, as you say, other people within your groups who you want to get informed of that. Let us know, and as I say, we can look to do further sessions.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Duncan and Jerry. I think you've dealt with a big deluge of questions there. There's been really useful information, especially in a topic which is changing as we speak. So we know that there are some parts of questions where the answer will appear in the next weeks and months. And please don't panic if some of it doesn't seem clear yet. Volunteer Scotland and Disclosure Scotland and SCVO will be here and will continue to update our information and support as we go to make sure that you do understand it. And do get in touch with SCVO as well, and we can kind of bundle up your questions and pass them on as they appear. But thank you very much for all your engagement and for joining us. If you're a big fan of change, then we have another webinar tomorrow morning about the changes in charity law with Oscar and with employment law specialists as well. And also please keep an eye out for the gathering coming up in February. So we've just opened this week, special previews for members to get booked on, and everyone else will be able to book on very soon. It's a really great programme and we'd love to see some of you there in person. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.